So Sainsmart have just launched their brand new machine with integrated ATC and automatic dust boot removal. And of course, I'm going to give you the first review of it. In all the years that I've been doing CNC work, this much automation has genuinely changed how I view doing jobs and how much easier it can be. How exciting is that? Now, before we dive in and start talking about the machine, there is one thing I just want to tell you for clarity, that this is a pre-production test unit. For example, you'll notice there is no drag chain down the Y-axis. There will of course be a drag chain on the production units. You also will not see the ATC lid in use during this video. The reason for this is pretty much as soon as I took it out of the box, well, it broke. But the good news is they have already developed a new design for the cover on this to help protect and keep all the dust out, and obviously a lot more durable. But for the most part, everything will be exactly the same because, to be honest, it is a really good machine. Now, usually I start a video by doing a spec roundup of everything about the machine before diving in. But to be honest, most of you are here for one thing. That right there, the ATC. So let's dive in and start with that first. So this is a 5-carriage ATC, basically meaning it will take 5 different bits in ER20 collet nuts. Now, if you're not familiar with ER20, they are quite a bit bigger than the ER11 collets you're typically used to seeing on Sainsmart machines. This basically means that they can take up to 13 millimeters or just over 1/2 inch diameter bits. Those are some pretty beefy bits that you can run on this machine. Now, at the end of the ATC, you'll see the little circle disc. This is the tool setter. What this allows the machine to do is determine the length of the bit that is within the ATC or within the particular nut that you have picked up. What it will do is lower down, touch it, make a calculation, and it then knows exactly how long that bit is within the spindle itself. This is really useful because you can work with different length bits and don't have to worry about keep resetting the Z0. It does it all automatically. So if you're changing from a small bit to a big bit, it will do that offset, do the calculation, and you literally do not have to touch a thing. And I really can't stress that point enough. You could do a job with all 5 different bits, multiple changes, and not have to reset the Z0 once. In fact, you don't have to set the Z0 at all. The way this all works is it's running from the top of your spoil board being the Z0. So it knows exactly what coordinate that is. Now, obviously the slight change there in your CAD/CAM software is most people who start from the top of the material just need to change it around so the Z0 is at the bottom. But in terms of workflow, that is a really simple change. So how does the ATC actually work? Well, it is a very simple concept in principle, and it's all about your spindle being able to spin clockwise as well as anti-clockwise. Now, on your ER20 collet, you obviously have the thread on the spindle itself as well as the thread inside of the nut. Now, to release the collet, it will spin it anti-clockwise, and as it lowers it into the casing, that grips the nut and basically allows it to release, and vice versa for picking the bits up. It will spin clockwise, lower it down, and it will engage with the thread, pull it up and tighten it in the casing itself. So as I say, a very simple principle that works extremely well. Now, when it comes to engaging and disengaging the bits itself, it really does slow the RPM down. I think it runs at 2000 RPM. This allows for it to grip and the torque to tighten it up, but also obviously the opposite when it is releasing and dropping the bit. Now, I have no doubt what some of you are thinking. Is that safe? Is it durable? Well, I can only go from my experience. As a test, I did a 50-bit change straight run, one after another, working up and down the carriage. It didn't miss a single one. It didn't cause any issues. There was no cross-threading. As long as everything has been set up correctly and the alignment is right, you are going to have perfect bit changes. Now, in terms of safety, I should also mention there are inbuilt features within the unit itself. So each carriage has a sensor and it knows whether the nut and bit are in there or not. And basically, if it goes to pick it up and it doesn't connect correctly for whatever reason, it will flag a warning. Also, let's say hypothetically it's picked the nut up but the bit has fallen out. When it goes over to the tool setter, it has a maximum limit that it will lower down, and if it gets to that point, again it will flag a warning to say there is a problem. So even if things do go wrong, it knows about it and it will tell you. Now, it is also worth pointing out this is not new technology. I'm not going to ignore the elephant in the room. this does exist and has been running elsewhere. So it just goes to show that it is proven, it does work, and it is a consistent way of changing bits in terms of an ATC that avoids using pneumatics. So is it safe? Is it durable? Well, from my experience, it certainly is. The only downside is the little bit of noise it makes as it torques things up in the holder itself. But other than that, it is making life extremely easy running CNC jobs. Now, in terms of the bits it can actually take, obviously I mentioned it can take 1/2 inch in diameter or 13 millimeters. In terms of the length or the tool stick out, well, I think this allows for up to about 75 millimeters or 3-inch tool stick out from the collets. That is pretty deep bits, so not only the thickness in the diameter, but it can also take long bits as well. Now, some of you will be looking at the position of this ATC and thinking, doesn't that take space out of your work area? Yes, it does. That is one of the trade-offs to an ATC, but what I will say is there's a lot of flexibility in this. The ATC can literally sit anywhere on your bed, so back, front, left or right, and in either the X or the Y orientation. So you can have it on the X orientation like I've got there, or you can have it on the Y orientation on the side there. For example, if you wanted to be able to slide a bigger piece of wood back and forth through the machine itself, well then you would turn it around, put it on the side, on the Y-axis, and that would allow you more depth from the front to back. So yes, it does take up some space, but you have a lot of flexibility in the way you can position it on the bed and set it up in terms of where it will pick up those bits for the ATC. Now, if you're listening to me in the background, let me have your full attention for a few seconds. Sainsmart have given me an exclusive limited time discount code for 20% off this machine as part of the pre-order. I think it's only going to last for 2 weeks, so the code is up on screen. It will also be in the description area, and as I say, a limited amount of time in order to use it. So if you are looking at this machine and you want an easier CNC life, then use that code now, sign up for the pre-order for when these machines start arriving, which I think is about the October time. Now, as well as the ATC, which is obviously awesome, there is also the integrated dust boot removal over here. Now again, in principle, this concept is so simple. It's a bit of code that just lowers it down, engages the dust boot and removes it out of the holder, or vice versa to disengage the boot. But that simplicity just really makes things much easier for you. You literally press start and watch the machine do everything for you. No removing the dust boot, no changing bits over. It will just go from start to finish on the job without you having to touch anything. Now, also, I don't have it set up here because I didn't have the hardware sent to me, but there is also a bit cleaner. So once it has disconnected the dust boot, before it actually deposits the tool back into the holder, it will clean the bit on a brush, get rid of any debris, then take it over to the ATC and drop it in the holder. Just basically minimizing any dust getting into the ATC itself. So not only is it efficient, it's actually really clever. Now there is one thing I need to cover off about this style of ATC. Obviously your bits sit loosely within the collet and the insert whilst they are in the ATC themselves. Unlike pneumatic ones where you actually lock it into a holder already, these just sit there freely. Now sometimes your bits will hold in there nice and tight, other times they may be a tad loose depending obviously on the shank diameter and the quality of the insert that you are using, or in reality just the weight of the bit itself. Now in terms of trying to find a solution for this, well, it is a little bit difficult. You can't really put anything springy in the ATC to hold it in place because it's pretty much always going to push your bit right up into the collet itself, and then when that pushes down to lock it in place, you know, you're going to have a scenario like this, which is not always ideal. Now the solution that I have been doing, and I'm probably going to get told off for this, is using this right here, blue thread lock. If you're not familiar with this, it's a bit like a soft glue. Now I just put the tiniest amount on the shank itself, push it in there, let it set, and it does hold the bits in place. Because it is like a soft glue, it does also mean that if you want to change the bits over, they will pull out and you can always clean the insert up itself. Now as I say, I don't necessarily think this is the proper solution. All I'm saying is it is the solution that has worked for me without causing me any issues and allowed the bits to stay in place whilst inside the ATC. So just something to think about. True story, I have used an ATC on another machine. I also destroyed the ATC on that other machine. I have never used an ATC integrated with a dust boot on a machine this powerful. Now, as a result, the first time I went to run each one individually and also together, I stood there the whole time with my hand over the big red button. I have not had to use that big red button once, hence this big smile. So that is obviously all the cool stuff a lot of you wanted to know about with the automation, but obviously there is the entire machine itself, and I'm going to cover that off in a bit more detail now. Now, the Pronax itself comes in two different versions, the Forge and the Spark. I think I have the Forge version, which basically is the size of the work area. So for my version, this is just over 800 by 800 on the work area. I think the Spark is 600 by 900. So it's basically all the same hardware, just two slight different variations on the work area itself. Now, in terms of the hardware, we have some very powerful NEMA 23 stepper motors running these, and these are upgraded from any NEMA 23 motors you have seen on previous Sainsmart machines. And one thing I really like about them is the manual adjustment. Instead of having knobs on the machine if you need to readjust any of the axis, there are override up and down buttons on here that you can use. So simple upgrade again, but a very useful upgrade. Now, in terms of the framework itself, well, you can see this is basically a big brother to the 4040 Pro Max. Same concept, same principle, just all enlarged a little bit. On the y-axis, we've got linear rods. On the z and the x-axis, we have linear rails. And these are all being driven on ball screws, so a very smooth control system for you to work on. The limit switches as well have also been upgraded to be induction limit switches as opposed to contact limit switches. You got the little plate here with the sensor actually on the axis itself. Now, the thing with induction limit switches is they are typically seen to be more accurate and less likely to set off false alarms. So again, a very nice upgrade. Now, earlier on I was mentioning about the ER20 collet. Well, the other big upgrade on this machine is the actual spindle that those fit to. A 2.2 kilowatt spindle, the biggest spindle Sainsmart have ever fitted on one of their machines, and it is a beast. Runs up to 18,000 RPM, and it basically means that you're going to be able to run pretty much any bit at manufacturer's recommended settings. No needing to slow things down because that will tear through anything. Now, obviously the linear rods are not as thick as another manufacturer out there of a similar style, shall we say. Does that impact the quality? Well, I think it's offset by the 2.2 kilowatt spindle. And obviously, as I said, that can tear through anything. As an example, I was machining aluminium 1 millimeter deep per pass, 2,500 millimeters per minute with a 6 millimeter bit, and it was doing it just fine. All the jobs that I have ran have been using the manufacturer's recommended settings, and again, no quality issues coming through there. Obviously, if you are driving that spindle into something too fast and too aggressive, then yes, you may start to see some flex in those rods. So I think as long as you're sticking to reasonable and the manufacturer's recommended settings, your quality should be fine. I'll move on and quickly cover off the setup of this machine. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is sort of an upgraded version of the 4040 Pro Max, and the setup for it again is actually very similar. The two y-axis, the x-axis, and then adding the Z carriage to the front of it. So keeping it very simple. Now, they do provide you with these supports to allow it to keep square as you install it onto your bed, or you can buy an additional hybrid bed for this as well. So you do have some options there as to whether you're mounting it onto a table and want to do your own spoil board, or purchasing their hybrid board instead. And in terms of setup time, you're probably talking less than an hour because they have kept it so simple. That's even with testing everything for being square and make sure it is all aligned. Now, that's obviously just the setup of the main machine itself. The ATC does take a little bit more work. It's not complicated, but there is a little bit of setup and calibration required as part of this. Now, basically the way it works is Sainsmart give you the files to pilot the holes for the ATC. So you put the correct bit in, you run the job to pilot the holes wherever you want the ATC to be. Once you've done that, you fix the ATC in place, and then you basically use a little device that they give you that fits in the first hole. You register the settings on the control box, move over to the fifth hole, register the settings for that, and then it does all the calculations for every other bit in between. So there is a little bit more work there, but again, I would not say it's overcomplicated. And actually a very similar thing with the dust shoe as well. That is basically just telling it the coordinates of where the dust shoe is, and it does all the calculations after you've done that. Now what I would say is if you are a brand new person to CNC, personally, I would set the machine up first, do some basic jobs on it and get used to running the machine before moving on to installing the ATC. Whilst it's not complicated, there are obviously some settings and calibrations you have to change, and that may be overwhelming for someone that is brand new. The instructions that Sainsmart give you are very clear and walk you through every step, but as I say, I would break it down into 2 stages and treat them separately. Now in terms of running the machine itself, it is fitted with a 7-inch touchscreen offline controller, which is actually really nice to use. It is very clear, very easy to navigate for starting jobs, stopping them, changing bits over, changing settings for certain things. So it was a nice experience using the inbuilt offline controller, and I'm not usually an offline controller person, but that was very easy. Now I should mention that you can use things like G-Sender or UGS to run the machine. However, the caveat is that it will not work with the ATC. The ATC only works with the offline controller at the moment. So basically, load your G-code onto a memory stick, plug it into the offline controller, set the X and Y 0, hit start, and you're off. Now in terms of accuracy and repeatability, I did all my usual tests with this, and all the results came back within 1 or 2 hundredths of a millimetre as expected, which to be honest is a higher tolerance than most people work to, certainly me. Now in terms of the price at the point of recording this, there are 4 variables available for this setup. You can get the forge with the ATC and the hybrid bed, which is basically the top package, coming in at $3,599. If you just want the forge on its own without the extras, that is $2,599, so $1,000 offset for all the extras included. Now the Spark is a little bit cheaper. For the Spark with all the extras, that is $3,299, and if you want the Spark just on its own, that is $2,399. I think I got all those figures the right way around. Now in terms of perceived value, obviously that is individual depending on your budget and your requirement. For me, the value in this really is all about the time saving with the ATC and the ease with the dust shoe mount. Not having to worry about it, not having to change bits, the simplicity of clicking start, letting it run, that is where the value is in this setup for me. Now one important thing I should point out is this is not a standard Gerbil machine. Now Gerbil by default does not accept tool changes, so it cannot work with an ATC. So it's sort of Gerbil, but it's a branched off version in order to make it work with that. Now for most people, do not worry about this, it won't make a difference. However, if you are using something like Easel, I don't believe Easel will work with this machine because it doesn't accept tool changes. However, if you are using something like Fusion, Vectric, or my favourite Carveco Maker, you will not have a problem. As you're putting your settings in, you literally just say use tool 1, use tool 2, and it will know exactly what to do, and then you just select the post processor for this machine and it will do all the hard work for you. Now to this point I normally do my quick roundup, but I genuinely don't script any of my videos, and I don't really know what to say at this point that I haven't already said. I have reviewed a lot of machines, I've changed a lot of bits, I've broken a lot of bits and also made a lot of mistakes. But the idea of just pressing start, stepping back and watching the machine do everything on a multi-bit job, as well as cleaning everything up, knowing there's not going to be any mistakes, that's really been a game changer for me, and I'm so happy I've been able to test and review this machine. Don't get me wrong, it took a slight change in mentality from going from doing everything manually to begin with to using the ATC, but it's like anything, once you've done it a few times, you really don't look back and it just becomes second nature for you to do it. So yeah, very thankful I've reviewed this machine. Don't know how I'm going to go back, and we'll end it at that point. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. If you are looking to purchase this machine, check out the links, and if it's within the first 2 weeks, don't forget about that exclusive discount code. Thank you all very much for watching. Final thanks as always goes to my patrons, and I'll see you all on the next episode.